Welcome to Good Game, I'm Hex.
And I'm Bajo.
Tonight on the show, the return of two much-loved but almost done and dusted consoles, the PlayStation Vita and the WiiU.
Yes, it's nice to see them both getting a bit of love before being put out to pasture. First up, the hacking and slashing of Severed on the Vita.
And then it's to outer space for some dogfighting, or should we say foxfighting in Star Fox Zero. Plus, Goose will follow some Indigenous students who compete to get their original game concepts developed.
Most games that try to make you learn maths or science, it's usually just like, the fish are coming by, answer the questions before they leave the screen or something like that.
And I was actually one of the judges, but I won't spoil what happens. You have to wait and see.
Oh, sneaky. But first, can you name the game for this week? Ooh-ya, ba-ba-ba-doo-ya, ooh-ya. Ooh, it's an ooh-ya.
Hey, Bajo, have you seen the Vita? We need it for the Severed review.
The what?
The Vita. Small, handheld Sony gaming device with the...
Oh, the Vita. Hex, that belongs in a museum, but I will go and get it.
Thanks.
Owie, owie, ow. Hex, I did it.
Well, that's great, but this is a PSP.
I'm off. It's fun to joke about the Vita not having any games, but we're actually both pretty sad about it. The lack of support for this device over its lifespan leaves little hope for a successor. And as much as I like what Nintendo do with their handhelds, I loved what Sony were doing with this one. I just want big, juicy, meaty games on the Vita, Hex.
I feel those days may be over, Bajo, but before the Vita disappears into the ether, you may want to have one last slash with Severed.
The game begins with Sasha appearing to enter her ransacked home. After checking your appearance in a mirror, you notice you're missing an arm. And also, there's a frickin' scary demon behind you.
The demon explains that your parents and brother have been taken by this world to be devoured. You're handed a sword, then after a fun flashback tutorial section, you venture into the wilds to fight grotesque beasts and explore perilous dungeons.
The best way to describe this game is it's kind of like Infinity Blade meets Legend of Grimrock with a bit of Fruit Ninja thrown in. Combat is all about swiping on the front touchscreen with short, fast swipes for small damage and long ones for bigger hits.
However, each enemy is unique. You definitely won't be able to just spam your way through fights. Some will block attacks from certain directions with armor, others will slowly grow large and then attack, and others will have weak spots to hit.
I enjoyed fighting these creatures, Hex, but it's when you get a whole bunch surrounding you and you have to fight them all at once that things get a bit trickier. You need to prioritize targets and switch between them, watching for any attacks that you might be able to counter. Eventually, you get a blind ability, which helps with crowd control, and you soon learn all the attack patterns of enemies, which helps to take out the weaker ones quickly. I like that everything you can see makes sense. It's easy to see when you need to switch targets, when you need to counter, or when you've messed up.
Yeah, it's all fairly straightforward. There's nothing in the combat that's too taxing on the brain, and the enemies are varied enough to keep things interesting. As you attack, you'll also build a focus meter. When full, it allows you to finish off enemies by severing their body parts. You have to be quick about it, and it soon becomes quite important because you use these parts to upgrade Sasha's abilities.
Those upgrades really matter too. And once you start making progress with those upgrades and finding bits of gear, it all gets a bit obsessive.
Yeah, it's the dungeon crawling that really hooks you.
Yeah, hallways full of monsters, puzzles, switches, and blocked doors. You'll spend a fair bit of time backtracking, solving secrets, and figuring out these tricky puzzles as you fight your way through these halls. Some puzzles were really obvious, like just clicking a square in a wall, but then there were others where I swear I was doing the right thing, but I just could not figure it out.
Yeah, I found the dungeon design to be quite confusing. I got stuck quite a bit.
Yeah, me too, especially with those doors that only open during the day or night. The only way to change the time of day is by walking up to these big gongs and swiping them and then walking back. The dungeons are designed like this on purpose, but if you miss a door somewhere or get turned around, it can be a bit frustrating. Especially if you're playing in short bursts.
Yeah, it is super satisfying though when you complete a dungeon run, you get a whole bunch of upgrades and gear. The step out into the open wild is always welcome too, and the art style is quite lovely with strong oranges and purples.
I like the art style too. I especially liked the monster design in the mountain zone. They were much harder to fight, plus the zone had these gross, weird monsters to walk through. But this game doesn't move like an FPS. It kind of fades between scenes. I didn't really mind that, but it just was a bit odd.
Yeah, you do get used to it after a while, but it was kind of off-putting at first. It just kind of messed with my brain a bit.
I guess the question is, why is it designed like this to load each scene individually? The Vita could certainly handle it if it was constant motion. We're just guessing, but it does make me think that perhaps it was designed this way with a future mobile release in mind. In fact, Hex, I think this would actually play much better on a mobile device because the Vita's quite awkward to hold in one hand.
Yeah, I actually had to play this on a flat table to be effective with those super fast swipes. You know, I really wanted to love this Bajo, but in the end I just got too confused and lost and turned around playing this that I just found it frustrating. So I'm giving it 2.5 out of 5.
Yeah, I was expecting a bit more from it, to be honest, but I did enjoy the combat and the game's dark themes, and it's quite inexpensive, so I'm going to give it 3 stars.
This week, I want to talk about the practice of releasing games while they're still in development. You know, early access or pre-alpha builds or whatever you want to call it. Because in my opinion, too many games are riding the early access wave and just stringing us along for years without ever delivering a finished game. Or they're giving away so much of their experience that they actually destroy any of the excitement I had for the thing in the first place.
Dumb! I'm bored with it now.
Now, I understand for a lot of developers, early access is a great way for them to get their idea out there and get feedback on how to improve it. Not to mention help fund development on the thing. And there are some awesome games that have been born out of early access. Take something like DayZ, a game I could not have been more excited about when it first came out way back in 2013.
We're in the car, and who's driving? Oh no! Off we go.
But now, after years of waiting, I've just moved on. I don't even care anymore. And even if it did come out, I've already had my fill. But it won't ever come out, will it? I mean, it's still just in alpha. Alpha!
What are you waiting for? Do it! Do it!
Now, obviously, I enjoyed my time with the early version, and I'm not saying that there isn't a good experience to be had with unfinished games. I just wish more developers would set themselves a realistic goal and get to it. For many of these games, if they were being made under the guidance of a traditional publisher, they would have either been axed completely or at the very least had their ambitions reined in to a point where they could actually deliver a finished game before I go grey. When it's left to us, the public, to decide, well, we're a fickle and indecisive bunch. So we hang on to our half-finished, broken pre-alpha access games, hoping one day a full release will fix everything, when we know in our hearts it won't. And if you're thinking there's no other way to generate hype, excitement, or funding for a game's release, well, what about releasing a good old-fashioned demo? Give me a nice taste of your game, a small snippet to whet my appetite and make me want more. Not the whole game, minus any polish and half the features. Sure, no one's forcing me to play any of these unfinished experiences, and I could just wait for the final version. But games are often fleeting in so many ways. Missing out on the first few weeks of an early access could mean missing out on a game's best days. Those heady days where everyone is discovering its joys together and a community starts to flourish.
Alright, there you go. You still got the mention.
They're stuck in his farm.
But by the time it actually comes out, if it ever does, years down the road, almost no one's going to care. Players will have moved on to the next best thing, and that game's best days will forever be a buggy, suboptimal experience that was just a fraction of its potential.
Pretty lame, Millhouse.
You know, ever since Minecraft came along as an alpha and captured some kind of development and cultural lightning in a bottle, every man, woman and dog that can code has been trying to emulate that model. But now, after 7 years, how many other games can claim to have had that same level of success and user support? No, instead what we have is a sea of half-baked alphas, broken survival clones, early access duds. So I think it's time to stop relying so much on early access and consider going back to more traditional, and let's face it, reliable releases. And for the record, if you think small, awesome games can't exist without this model, just look at titles like Stardew Valley or Undertale, polished, finished games that came along and charmed the pants off everyone.
Oh, jeez.
But that's just my opinion. Do you like the slow burn of unfinished games, or would you prefer to just wait for the full experience? Let us know on social media, and we'll discuss more on tomorrow's episode of Pocket.
The Australian Indigenous Mentoring Experience is an organisation that helps Indigenous students finish high school and go on to further education. They recently gave a bunch of students the chance to pitch and develop their own games.
Yes, I was one of the judges that was lucky enough to choose the winning concept, which is now a game in development. Goose takes us on their journey.
In management mode, you have to manage the players' energy bars.
What style of gameplay is this, guys? Is we talking like, is it a 3D world?
The student is very curious and picks up the gadget and is transferred back to the time of the dreaming.
So Game On was a project that we came up with after we were lucky enough to be awarded $500,000 in the form of a grant from the Google Impact Challenge. We pitched an idea to Google to make a game to make maths and science cool for kids. So we asked the kids in our Year 8 program to come up with something that incorporated Aboriginal culture, maths and science. From those submissions, we picked the top 18 from all across the country and flew them to Sydney. They got split up into groups of 4 or 5 and got paired with a mentor from AIE, the Academy of Interactive Entertainment. Once they were in those groups, they were given a bit of a theme and then they were set free to go as wild as possible.
With direction and help from the mentors, the mentees were well on their way to pitching an idea. So I decided to drop in, see how they were going.
Originally about what your interests were, so...
Who wants to give me the elevator pitch of the game?
So an alien drops a mechanical device and then a high school student picks it up and then they get sent back into a dream time. So you have to get back to the present, but you have to go through boss fights with maths and science questions.
I have to draw totems and talk about totems. Well, every totem is like a place where the community is. Like my totem is long-necked turtle and Yoda tribe. Once you're stuck on hard level, you can just call your totems.
Cool, okay, so it's kind of like in assist mode or something.
Yeah.
Our game is just basically a schoolyard-based sports soccer game. So you are a young kid.
There's been a fight in the school and he's been expelled because of it, and in order to get back into school he's made a deal with his principal, help them win a competition, then he's able to get back into the school.
You have to keep all the players' grades up. So that's where the maths and science comes into it. So you get the players' homework and you have to answer the maths and science questions on the homework. If you get them wrong, obviously the grades will drop and they cannot play.
Just coming up with the ideas is kind of hard sometimes too, seeing what kids our age would actually want to play it.
Yeah. Most games that try to make you learn maths or science, it's usually just the fish are coming by, answer the questions before they leave the screen or something like that. They just send you to the computer lab, go in cool math games, play this.
After the mentees had a pretty good idea about the kind of project they wanted to develop, they were given the opportunity to pitch it. This was a chance for them to practice what they would do on the final day when we got to Google and they stood in front of the judges before the best idea was picked. You could tell that there was a lot of nerves in the air. The kids had worked so hard all week and it was all leading up to this.
Okay, you guys are going to go up and present soon. What are you feeling? Are you excited? Nervous?
Nervous, really nervous. Just hope we don't pass out.
Yeah. Fair enough. Have you made friends out of the team as well?
Yeah, we all seem pretty close now.
Yeah, it's been actually a great experience.
Good luck out there. I hope you do well. Break a leg.
Not literally.
Don't actually break a leg,
Not
though.
literally.
No, okay, good luck.
Like hired actors.
Okay, Hex, we're here at Google, and you're actually one of the judges. What are you going to be looking for in these games?
We need to see, obviously, all the basics. If the game is, well designed in terms of its mechanics, if it's, appealing and fun. But also, we're going to look at things like whether or not it's, incorporating aspects of education and science in there as well, which is a tricky thing to do to make a game educational and fun. But that's kind of the goal of today.
Excellent. Well, I've seen what some of the kids are coming up with, and I think you're going to be impressed.
Really? Oh, I'm excited.
Okay, so guys, I'm Emily, and this is my team, Joanne, Luke, and Christian.
And we're here today to pitch to you our idea.
Our goal for this game is to help students around the world with their maths, science, skills, and knowledge. And also to teach everyone to not take objects that don't belong to them.
Flashback is a third-person, level-by-level, free-roaming education game in disguise.
The only way to complete the game is to overcome and answer scientific and mathematical questions.
This is our game, Escape from Bobby Jim's Curse. Thank you.
So the groups have all gotten up and given fantastic presentations, but now the stressful part. The judges have gone away and they're going to decide which game will actually get made.
History and culture.
Mystery. I felt so proud of the students when they were up there doing their final pitches.
Work with.
And they also mentioned...
They sounded professional and they sounded like it had been something they were working on for months, not a couple of days.
So, who's the winner?
The winner is Second Chances.
Okay, Hex, you picked a winner. Talk me through it.
Okay, so we chose Second Chances. The most exciting aspect of it, though, was the fact that they'd managed to hide the kind of educational elements of the game within the gameplay rather than them being kind of overt equations and stuff.
Well done, guys. Your game, Second Chances, won. How does it feel?
It feels awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Speechless.
Speechless. Good way to put it.
I'm going to tell my kids about it.
Yeah, like I created a game.
Definitely.
Damn.
And overall, guys, how's the whole experience been? How's the week been in terms of, if you had to sum it up to...
Best week of my life.
Amazing.
I hope that this experience has given the kids full confidence in their ability. They were thinking about what can happen not just at the end of this week, but at the end of this year or at the end of school. So to see them step into that mindset and blossom in confidence was really inspiring, and I'm so thankful I got to be a part of it.
Thanks, Goose. Well, those anthropomorphic aviators are back with Star Fox Zero.
Yes, the long-dormant on-rails shooter is taking flight with a new adventure for the first time in 2 console generations. Although I'm not sure that we can technically call it a new adventure, since this is pretty much a reimagining of the N64 outing, which was called Lilac Wars here in Australia.
Yeah, it's basically the exact same story, with the exiled scientist Andros unleashing an invasion throughout the Lilac system, and it's up to Fox, Falco, Slippy and Peppy to put a stop to it.
Yeah, and the game even has a very similar layout, where you start on Corneria, which is a pretty faithful recreation of the 64 level. And along the way to the final planet, Venom, you'll find quite a few homages to that classic game.
Sadly, I don't think this game is going to be remembered as a classic, because when it's at its best, it's a pale imitation of a game that came out almost 20 years ago, and when it's at its worst, it's a confused mess of awkward controls, gimmicks, and weak level design.
Yeah, I mean, I think I enjoyed it a little bit more than you, but for a fan favorite, it's decidedly average, and that's disappointing. But when it's embracing the thing that makes Star Fox great, which is solid on-rails shooting, it's actually quite good.
Is it though, Hex? I don't think they've pulled off the action as well as they did with the 64 version. The core of the problems with this game is in the controls. The big new feature/gimmick is that the WiiU's gamepad serves as a cockpit view, which gives you a sort of first-person window into the action. And it also uses the gamepad's motion controls to assist with aiming, so you can use the pad to aim around the screen for extra precision. At least that is the theory.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, and occasionally in practice, I found it quite helpful. after you get used to it, there are plenty of moments where you can see the potential of this setup. And it can feel strangely satisfying taking down foes by flying in one direction while aiming in another.
But it's a bit hard to put into words why it doesn't work that well. If I could describe it in a feeling, it would be like a, huh. Part of it is that you're trying to constantly split your attention from looking at the TV to looking at the gamepad. And at times, I just wasn't sure where to look, so I'd end up crashing into things.
Yeah, it does take a little bit of getting used to with your brain having to kind of split between two different perspectives like that.
Yeah, and I just found I was thinking more about the controls than the game itself. It wasn't intuitive. It's like I'm patting my head and rubbing my belly at the same time, but I never get any better at it. Yeah, it's like that.
I can do it.
I can't.
I can't do it the other way, though. Oh, yes, I can. No, I can't. Look, I grew to enjoy it, but I think tying aiming to motion controls the way they have here still has its issues. For example, you'll regularly find your center of aim wandering off to the side as your hands just naturally shift position. And you don't really notice until you realize you're fighting with the game to aim where you want to.
There's actually 2 buttons on the controller dedicated to correcting your aim. And you know your control scheme's in trouble when you're given 2 buttons, multiple options to try and fix it.
Yeah, there is also a co-op mode though. Here, one of you flies and shoots while the other just shoots, and you compete for a high score. And I actually thought that was a good way to play.
It definitely takes the edge off just having one screen to focus on, but it doesn't fix the other issues.
Yeah. Now, you can actually turn off motion controls for some parts. But then that never feels quite right, since a lot of the game is designed to need them and some parts actually require them.
Unfortunately, the real crime is that way too much of the game isn't focused on the traditional Star Fox formula. It feels like well over half of the game takes place outside of the R-Wing. You're always forced to go into that chicken walker mode, which is one of the most annoying things I've ever had to control.
Yeah, and if it isn't the chicken walker, it's the tank or the hovercopter or something. And I loved those extra vehicles as little bonuses off the beaten track in the 64 game, but they're just unwelcome as a major focus.
Yeah, and as an example of just how much of a focus they actually are, spoiler warning, the final boss fight is pretty much entirely in chicken walker mode. Sake! This is meant to be the peak of excitement, the final showdown. Everything leads to this moment, and you're in the bloody walker again.
Well, I think for me, it's just that you're always being thrown into something new. You never really get long enough to gel with the controls. Just when you're starting to get to grips with it, they change things up on you.
Yeah, absolutely. They've tried to cram in too many ideas to show off how useful this gamepad can be, but they all just fail or come across gimmicky. Like, why does all the game dialogue have to come out of the gamepad speakers?
For sharper shooting, use your motion control.
Although I admit it is nice to have a way to mute Slippy and Falco.
Yeah, and also this is meant to be a fast-paced on-rails shooter. So why am I doing things like lowering a robot drone and driving it through small tunnels?
And why is there a stealth mission?
Oh yeah!
This is a game about spaceships and stuff, it's not Call of Duty. It's weird to have a stealth mission in a Star Fox game, full stop, but I wouldn't have minded so much if it wasn't such a terribly designed level. Look at these walls that you can't fly over for some reason. Is it so hard to put a roof on a level? And it's got what has to be one of the slowest, least exciting escape sequences ever.
Well, one of the things the series is known for is replayability. And levels are still designed with those secrets and different paths to take, which is nice. But there does seem to be less variety in the paths though, with fewer planets to go to.
So if for some reason you want to do a second playthrough to make up for having fewer planets, you can approach missions quite differently on that second run. After you've played through once, you'll unlock different vehicles and modes. So for example, on Corneria, you can transform into the Walker. Great.
I feel like we're being very nitpicky here, but I should say that, you know, I did enjoy bits of this. For all of its flaws, it's playable.
That's one for back of the box. It's playable. Hex, 2016, good game. When is that high praise? I think the formula wasn't broken. Look at what the 64 version did with one analog stick on a controller. And then look at what they've messed up here with 2 sticks, 2 screens, motion controls, and all kinds of gimmicks. They've lost that pure and simple design that was so much fun.
Well, I mean, I don't think that's quite fair. They obviously had to try something new to kind of update it and refresh the series. You know, on-rail shooters are a pretty dated type of game design, so you can't fault their ambition, really.
Yes, you can. I completely fault their ambition. This just made me miss the classic so much more, so I'm giving it 1 star.
Well, I think there are moments here that Star Fox fans will enjoy. I'm giving it 2 out of 5.
So did you name the game for this week? It was Guacamelee on the PlayStation Vita. You played as Juan, a luchador on a mission to rescue El Presidente's daughter and save the lands of the living and the dead from the evil Carlos Calaca. Anderson named the game because it was developed by Drinkbox Studios, the same developers behind this week's touchscreen slasher Severed.
Next week on the show, it's Uncharted 4.
Plus, we'll team up for some co-op carnage in Alienation.
Don't forget, Nick Boy has all of your daily gaming headlines on Good Game Pocket, which you can find on iView and YouTube. And over on Spawn Point on ABC3 this weekend, we'll review the new Skylanders Battlecast deck building game.
So until next time, BaJo out.
Hex out.
Everything's a card game nowadays, Hex.
It's true. It's the new hot thing.
Yeah, there'll be a Call of Duty one next. You just put down like Kevin Spacey, the Kevin Spacey card.
And explosions, breach, breach, breach.
Some ghost dogs.
I win.
I would play that.